Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Ladies Tea, our second official episode. We are so stoked to be back. Tonight, we're joined by Turning Point contributor, my friend, you know her, you love her, Erin Elmore, and host of The Liz Wheeler Show. I bet you can't guess her name. Of course, Liz Wheeler. Liz and Erin. Thanks, ladies. Welcome to the show. Erin, this is like old hat for you. You know exactly what's happening here. Liz, there's been quite a bit to talk about lately with Joe Biden, with documents. We found more this weekend. Guess what? More documents, classified documents found at properties of Joe Biden's. And it's been very interesting, I think, to watch this play out, at least from our perspective and in our family, given the obvious double standard that has existed. The interesting part to me is that you had Joe Biden's personal attorneys able to apparently, prior to anyone with any security clearance of any variety, getting in there and checking out what's going on. Joe's personal attorneys, I think, were just able to kind of run through houses, different properties, and see what they could find. Do we feel that that would have been afforded or should have been afforded to President Donald Trump?
Thanks so much, first of all, for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. My first time on your show.
Yeah.
You can tell me this better than I can tell you, but if I'm not mistaken, when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, raided former President Donald Trump's residence, they forced his personal attorney to wait at the bottom of the driveway while they searched his office. Even though she was his attorney, she should have been allowed to oversee when law enforcement was staging this raid on his premises. But of course, the contrast between the two is grotesque from start to finish. What Joe Biden has done is an actual crime. He's mishandled classified information. And Laura, one of the things that I noticed from the vague statements that the Department of Justice and the Biden administration put out is they just barely noted that some of these documents or groups of documents that were found stretched all the way back to when Biden was in the Senate, which means he was in the Senate, 15 years ago? That's the minimum amount of time that it could be. This could have been almost 2 decades of mishandling this classified information, whereas President Trump was in a dispute with the National Archives over who owned letters from Kim Jong-un, because the National Archives wanted it, Trump wanted it. That's not the same thing at all. Not at all. The other thing I think interesting to note is how the Department of Justice is trying to belittle what they found in Biden's residence. They're saying, oh, it was 6 documents. Well, let me tell you, classified documents don't come with one piece of paper. They come in stacks. They come in packets. This is not 6 pieces of paper. This could be 6 bankers' boxes full for all we know.
Well, that's exactly right. And Erin, I think Joe Biden says we should all just calm on down. First of all, these documents, Erin, were locked in the garage. All right. So number one, they were locked in there. We should just relax about it. And according to all the media and the DOJ and everybody else involved, Joe Biden's cooperating. So this is not a big deal.
Right. So that to me is the funniest part. That's like saying, listen, guys, Jeffrey Dahmer did not commit any crimes. He cooperated.
Yeah, he was cooperating. It's fine.
The cooperation has nothing to do with the crime. Just because you cooperate afterwards doesn't negate your bad actions. But you know what else I think it would be really important to focus on? The Penn Biden Center. So he left office as the vice president. The Penn Biden Center didn't open until a year later. Where were those documents for a year before they were found in the Penn Biden Center? Yep. Where were they? We don't know that either. And no one's really addressing that. Moreover, I think that our Republican House should also ask, why, when the Penn Biden Center opened, did we get $53 million in donations from the Chinese Communist Party? No one's really talking about that because we have the whole document fiasco from everything else. So I think there are so many layers to this disgusting cake that we really need to go through, because I think it's only going to continue to get worse. And I think we really do need to hold him accountable. But we know different treatment when you're a Democrat than if you're a Republican.
Yeah, no, obviously, we all know how that game is played. You know, you talk about China, Erin, and I think it's so interesting. And I think it will be interesting if we ever find out really what is in all of these classified documents. We know so far that some of them at least relate to Ukraine. Now let's think back to Ukraine and the ties to the Biden family. Let's think about Burisma. Let's think about Hunter Biden. Let's think about all the money that was made there by a guy who had zero experience in the energy industry, and apparently 10% was going to the big guy, Joe Biden. There's so much more here. I think you're right, the layers upon layers of it. And I don't know, you think that maybe Joe Biden's personal attorneys, if they're able to sweep all these properties and look for all of the documents to give to the FBI, maybe if there was something like that that might not look too great for the Biden family, I don't know, could those things kind of just disappear? Liz, what do you think? Is that a possibility? Of course it is.
It certainly is. I mean, I think that the pretext for all of these searches that were first conducted by Biden's personal attorneys and then by the FBI were probably most likely because Joe Biden had received a subpoena for documents related to a Hunter Biden investigation. This is kind of why I don't buy into the narrative that you'll hear from some people that says, oh, this is the leftist the shadow Democrat apparatus's way of getting rid of Joe Biden. I hear that and I think, no, it's not, because this is exactly what happened during 2020 when the mainstream media, the Democrats, and big tech censored information about Hunter Biden's laptop and all of those scandals. They were trying to cover for Hunter Biden because they know that Hunter Biden's corruption, his selling access to foreign adversaries to Joe Biden when he is vice president, is very off-putting to the American voter. That's what we're seeing happen. Again, we're not seeing a mainstream media and Democrat politician saying, wait a second, probably this was all related to a Hunter Biden investigation, which means there's more to that than meets the eye. No, they're trying to keep that secret. And I think to what Erin said before about China plays a large part in this. The Penn Biden Center at the University of Pennsylvania, having gotten that $50 million, actually caused the University of Pennsylvania to lobby the Department of Justice to drop this investigation called the China Initiative, which is making sure that our STEM fields, especially at university levels, weren't infiltrated by Chinese spies, which they largely were. And because of that money, the University of Pennsylvania was influential in causing the Department of Justice to completely stop that initiative altogether, which is very dangerous.
Wow, it makes you feel real cozy and comfy inside, doesn't it? I also thought the timing of Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, stepping down was interesting. Now, so many people are like, oh, don't read into it. There's nothing to read into here. But I mean, you can't dismiss that. You know, I get it. It's a high stress job. It's a high stress environment to work in the White House. But gosh, if you're Joe Biden and your chief of staff comes to you in the midst of probably the biggest scandal of your presidency thus far, I mean, all the rest have totally been ignored. Don't you think, Erin, you might say to this guy, could you just give me like a couple of weeks before you announce this? I don't know. Do you make anything of the timing of that?
I mean, it certainly is suspicious. It looks like something is going on and he didn't want to be involved in it. And I also think it's very suspicious that the government knew that these documents were found before the midterms. And
Right.
we didn't hear about it until January. I think that they didn't want to have the red wave and wanted to do anything they could to protect their standing and just sort of kept it from us. And that also shows you that something is nefarious. But also a lot of the mainstream media of saying, oh, this is their way to take Biden out. I think it's far more sinister. What they're trying to do is go through a sort of process to create precedent to take Donald Trump out. So they're going to say, we did X, we did Y, and we did Z. But Donald Trump did X, Y, and Z wrong. We're going by the Biden standard. And by the Biden standard, he's completely clear. But of course, President Trump isn't. And it's so ironic, given that the president, Donald Trump, had the ability to declassify documents. Right. And Joe Biden, as the vice president, does not have the ability to declassify documents. So any way you look at the situation from an objective level, you can see that Joe Biden is far more in the wrong than anyone. And Donald Trump clearly is being, sort of air quotes framed. But no. Again, when you're Democrats, you can do whatever you want.
No, well, we know that to be true. Here's a really fun fact, by the way. Whenever Jimmy Carter was trying to get his CIA director, passed through the Senate for confirmation, guess who blocked his nominee for CIA director, Joe Biden? This is like the craziest thing ever. And the reason is because it was over mishandling of classified documents. The guy's name was Ted Sorensen, and Joe Biden, holier than thou, was like, we can't possibly let this nominee through. Okay, Joe Biden. But I guess this guy was looking right in the mirror whenever he said this. It's sort of amazing to hear these sorts of things. Speaking of looking in the mirror and maybe looking in the rearview mirror and seeing a mask, it sounds like the Biden administration is trying, ladies, to bring back the masks. Liz, what you think?
I think I actually don't understand this. I know that there are some COVID crazes. I fly all the time for work. You guys do as well. And when you're in an airport and on an airplane, there's always maybe 10, 15% of people who are still trying to social distance. They're still constantly using hand sanitizer and wearing their face diapers. But the vast majority of people, and I have to assume that in airports, it's not just Republicans, the vast majority of people are not wearing masks. They don't want to wear masks. They know that masks are not only ineffective, but largely can be harmful depending on if you have pre-existing conditions. People don't want this. So I don't quite understand the political motive of the Biden administration to try to bring this back, except that they are still so infuriated that their dictate, their unconstitutional dictate was overturned by a judge in Florida and they gained that power. But it's absurd. I'd like to think that the American people, if somehow this were brought back, would say, no, we're not going to do this, enough. But I have to say, I know this is really cynical. I expected that from people throughout the course of 2020 when California locked down, for example, when parks were closed, when they were preventing us from going to church, when restaurants were shuttered, all of these different things, then the masks and the vaccines and the mandates, all of these things I expected the American people to say, okay, I don't think so. That's a step too far. We got to stop the government from being so authoritarian. And they didn't. So maybe now people have seen the light and it'll be different. But it is kind of a head scratcher to see why the Biden administration would try to bring back masks unless it's just purely to control us.
I was going to say, this is completely about control.
Yeah.
There is no data. This isn't about COVID. There's no data to support that COVID is any running more rampant than it was 6 months ago, 8 months ago. There's no data or science behind this, but we already know they can create their own science. But from a legal perspective, the judge in Florida ruled that they don't have the ability. The CDC does not have the legal authority to basically write legislation. They are not the House. They are not the Senate. And the Supreme Court actually ruled on a different case that was involving the EPA that was trying to basically enact legislation. They said, you cannot do this. It is not within your power to do so. So now it's on appeal in the 11th Circuit. So Florida is part of the 11th Circuit. And there's a 3-judge panel as of right now. I think one is a Trump appointee, one is an Obama appointee, and I believe the other one is a Clinton appointee. So we don't know how it's going to turn out. A lot of the Clinton appointees have ruled sort of in a way that would, on a more conservative front, because Bill Clinton was a hard-on crime guy. So I think the judges that he appointed aren't these far-left social justice warriors.
Bill Clinton these days would probably have been considered a conservative.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you, right? Like, that's how far off the rails the Democrats have gone, is I mean, you're right. He cared about actually cracking down on crime.
Oh, yeah, he was really hard on crime. Actually, Bill Clinton incarcerated more African-American men than any president in the history of our country.
That's right.
So, but at any rate, we have to see what this 3-judge panel says in the 11th Circuit. My point is that Joe Biden or any 3-letter agency just can't be like, masks are back, because it's still in court right now. And I hope that this panel does say that this is unconstitutional, because on its face, it is unconstitutional. Now, if you want to have the House write some legislation and approve it by the Senate to get masks, that could be different, but we don't see that happening.
I mean, it is this mask stuff. I got to tell you, nothing is worse. We all remember it wasn't so long ago where you had to wear these masks. And I remember sitting on airplanes and just thinking how dumb we all must look to, if you could have fast forwarded time and seen how crazy things would get, 5 years ago, to think about anybody wearing a mask, you would have looked at somebody, one person getting on a plane wearing a mask like, oh, that person's a little bit strange. Then you look around at the rules on the airplanes, right? Whenever you're traveling, you were allowed to eat food and drink something, right? And take your mask off, but then you had to put it back on. I'm sorry. What are we talking about? Erin, like you said, there's zero scientific backing on this. This is insanity. And the fact that they think we're going to go back there is crazy.
Yeah. I was on a plane
It's also
recently.
it's not just unscientific. It can be dangerous. I was pregnant in 2020 during the height of all the COVID hysteria,
Oh, God
and I remember
bless.
flying with a mask, and I had to take an oxygen saturation finger monitor with me because it caused me. I mean, I had severe nausea and morning sickness, and it made me sick to wear a mask. My oxygen saturation would drop, and my midwife told me if it drops more than 1 or 2%, then you need to pull your mask down because that's dangerous to your daughter, your unborn daughter. And we see the same thing with children. There was a study done on young children that found that wearing these masks, especially all day in school, caused their oxygen saturation to drop enough that it impairs their brain function.
Yeah.
These are the studies that should cause the CDC to actually say, no, you absolutely should not cover your child's face. And it's ironic because it's these same agencies that tell us, make sure, that you don't roll your baby on its stomach. Make sure you don't fall asleep with the baby in its arms because you might obstruct your baby's face while it's sleeping. And they're simultaneously telling us to wrap our babies' faces in masks.
Right.
There was another study that showed that, sorry, Erin, there was another study that showed that wearing masks also, you can't perform as well. It cognitively impairs your judgment. They did a whole series of studies and people were playing chess. And basically what happened is those that were wearing masks over time, they got worse and worse scores. Some of it is because it's a distraction, but probably it has to do with the amount of oxygen getting to your brain. I don't know. Obviously, we have a lot of reasons not to wear them, and yet here we are. Sorry, what's your plane story, Erin? Because I'm
God,
dying.
I just thought it was just the height of irony. I was on a plane next to a guy doing the one bite, the mask up, the one bite, the mask up, the one bite. And then he took the mask off. Inside of the mask, laid it down on the tray table, which is probably the dirtiest. Like that's probably like licking.
That's one of the dirtiest. Yeah, if I'm ever on a plane with my kids and they're eating a snack and it even touches, there is not a 5-second rule on those airplane, little things. What's it called? Seat back. Forget it. That is it. We're not eating anything off of those. Those are disgusting.
I had to say something. I was like, excuse me,
say
sir.
Something?
I like, how you're like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to exercise self-control today. I'm not going to say a word. I just tapped him and I said, sir, your mask is face down on the tray table. And I'm pretty certain that's a very, very dirty surface. So, and then he picks it up, looks at it and says, oh, and puts it back on.
Oh, I feel so sad for him. I mean, like, not for nothing.
That's so disgusting, but so funny.
People can do whatever they want. I am all about it. If you want to wear a mask all day long, please do it. If you want to dye your hair green, I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. Don't tell me what I have to do. That's the big picture. But I will be totally honest. I judge people so hard. If you are like a 35-year-old, otherwise healthy looking male, and I see you in an airport with a mask on, I have fully judged you, and I'll say it right now. I'm like, what are you doing? I also want to know what kind of immune systems are we looking at long term for our children, for future generations? If we're not exposing ourselves, Rolling Stone put out a whole article about the best face masks we're still wearing on long flights, suggesting that anytime you're in a crowd of people, you should be wearing a face mask. Well, how about let's let our immune systems function. Let's let them do the best job they possibly can. You have this RSV, all these problems for kids right now, probably because they didn't get any exposure to any germs for 2 years. Are we kidding ourselves? I just don't understand.
I mean, that's the facts, go ahead, Liz.
As the mom of a young child, when I dug into the RSV stuff, because you read those headlines and your mama bear instinct, you're like, oh my gosh, is this going to hurt my child? And I dug into it and I thought, oh, okay, I see what happened, because children get exposed to RSV, at least they're supposed to, on a yearly basis. Yeah, right. It generally manifests as just a common cold. In some cases more seriously, but when you don't have that yearly exposure, then when you subsequently when you do contract it, it becomes more serious. So it was literally a man-made problem with these serious RSV cases because of these idiotic things from the CDC and the FDA. Listen, all those years when President Trump was talking about draining the swamp, this is actually the swamp. The swamp is not one bureaucrat or 2 bureaucrats, 3 idiots that happen to be political, but in an administration that contradicts their political opinions. No, the swamp is the actual apparatus of the CDC and the FDA and the NIH, these places that you can't just overturn overnight, that exercise such tremendous control over our lives that you are not, like, we're all sitting here talking about the ways that it's impacted our families out of politics. And these people have no accountability. These bureaucrats and these agencies have no accountability to us, to what we think is best for ourselves and our kids. And that part is one of the, honestly, it's one of the things that motivates me to fight, because it's not like we can just kick them out of Congress like someone we're dissatisfied with.
Well, has anybody seen the new food pyramid, by the way? Have you guys seen this? I know we didn't, like, I didn't even say that we wanted to talk about this today. I was talking to my mom earlier, and she was like, have you seen the new food pyramid? The new food pyramid, at the top of it, instead of like fruits and vegetables, things that you should put in your body, apparently it's like cereals and sugary cereals and snacks like that. And I guess the idea behind it is that it's because things are so expensive right now, people can't afford the things they're supposed to buy. Well, that's not what we need. You need to tell people what they really are supposed to be putting in their body. But to your point, Liz, it's all garbage. All the people who are making those decisions, and by the way, the first food pyramid apparently was started by the people who make cereal. I forget whatever company. Yeah. So like they had a vested interest in telling people, yeah, you should eat like sugary cereals. It's great for you. But I saw some study recently where they said like Lucky Charms are better to eat than eggs. What, are you kidding me?
Because
these
eggs
are the
like
people.
$9.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably more affordable to eat, but actually physically better for you. I'll never buy it. All the people who are making these decisions and putting out all of this information by which we should all live our lives, it is the swamp. You're right. You're exactly right. And it's really scary, because we're supposed to be able to trust these agencies and these people, and they're supposed to be giving us real information and not information that's going to benefit somebody's bottom line, or I don't know. It's really crazy stuff. All I know is during COVID, I made sure that my kids did not have a mask on, that I exposed them to as much as I possibly could. I knew they were not at risk from dying from COVID. And you should have seen when I lived in New York, the parents, when I would take them to a playground, outdoors, mind you, unmasked, who would grab their kids up and run out of a playground because I showed up with 2 kids without masks on, although maybe they knew who I was. I don't really know. It could have gone either way on that. And speaking of New York, we'll transition very lovely, in a lovely way to Hilaria Baldwin. Hilaria, how do we say her name?
Hilaria.
Hilaria.
All right.
But you know her real name is Hillary from Boston.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is her real name Hillary? Interesting.
Yes.
All right.
Her real legal name is Hillary, yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't seen, there's a video. I just tell you to Google it. Just look it up. Hillary Baldwin, Alec Baldwin's wife, outside of their apartment talking to paparazzi. And I get it. She was out there telling them that she wanted them to leave her children alone as they were going to school. Erin, you just said it. She's from Boston. But if you watch this video, it sounds like she has a Spanish accent of some variety. And I think we could all also go back and look at a Today Show appearance where she acted as though she was of a different original language, like her native language was not English. And she says, how do you call this cucumber? Like, right? Like, what are we doing? What's happening with Hilaria Baldwin, do you think, Erin? I'm confused.
She's like the Rachel Dolezal of celebrity wives, you know? So she tried to spin it when she first became public with Alec Baldwin, that she's from Spain. And we now know her name is Hillary from Boston, as indicated. Her parents, like, sometimes, like, basically had a timeshare in Spain, if they call it that over there. But it wasn't like she grew up there, going there all the time. And this whole Spanish accent thing is a complete and utter farce, because there were some yoga videos, because she is a yoga teacher, that came out of her teaching. I don't know what the year was. Again, we can look it up on Google, but I don't use Google. I use DuckDuckGo because it's not corrupted by the liberals. At any rate, I digress. There are these videos of her teaching yoga, and she did not have a Spanish accent in the least. She actually sounded like she had a little bit of a Boston accent.
Oh my God.
I'm not that great at accents. Maybe that was a Philly accent, but I don't know.
Well, look, here, you know what? I can see, Liz, if there are people who live in a certain area for a number of years, you do kind of pick up on, the dialect of the area. I grew up in North Carolina, and I certainly don't sound like I have a Southern accent, although many people I grew up with do. Most of my family does. But I moved to New York 15 years ago, and I was very conscious of my Southern accent. So I tried to kind of kind of get through it and talk a little differently, and you pick up on what other people you're around, your friends say. She lives in Manhattan though. I just don't understand this and why you would do that on camera. It's very confusing.
It's so weird. I mean, you'd have to be a super weirdo to be married to Alec Baldwin. Let's just set that straight. But I would venture to guess, Laura, that when you're around your family, your accent, your North Carolina Southern accent comes out a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
The same thing happens to me when I'm visiting my family in the Midwest. You hear me say "oh" and all kinds of Midwestern idioms a lot more when I'm around my family. Here's the thing about Hilaria Baldwin. I was actually willing to give her the benefit of the doubt when this first became a controversy, because I read it and I thought, oh wow, this is a really stupid controversy. Like, of all the things, this isn't ideological.
Yeah.
It's not political. It's not moral. It's not really anything. I don't really care, especially if she supposedly lived part of her teenage years insane. But the thing that made me change my mind on that original benefit of the doubt is she eventually said that she identified as multicultural. She identified as being both Spanish and American. And I thought, well, you can't just do that. I couldn't sit here and be like, well, I identify as Chinese, therefore my fake Chinese accent is supposed to be authentic, and you're not supposed to notice that it's completely
Could you
falsified
imagine,
here.
Liz, if you did that? No. Could you imagine?
It's so bananas. What could possibly possess her to do this, except, and here's where it does get political, Laura, except the fact that the left has this pyramid of privilege points, and the more identity that you can embrace that they consider to be a marginalized or minority identity elevates you as a victim in their eyes. She was trying to capitalize on that. That's what's so disgusting about it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And by the way, her husband is in a lot of hot water legally.
Yeah.
These charges against him are serious. And the prosecutor, unlike what Joy Behar on The View said, is not a Republican. She is a Democrat who's married to another woman. So she's certainly not some right winger. And he's facing up to 5 years in prison. And why this took so long is because the FBI was involved and they had to do a report, and all these different agencies were involved. And they still decided to press charges here. And if he has to go before a jury of his peers, I don't foresee that it's going to go well, because there's a lot of blame to go around. And because he is a celebrity and such a megalomaniac, he did all of those interviews. Those can be used against him in a court of law, and probably will.
Yeah. By the way, you're right. He shouldn't have said anything. I mean, the silence is key in situations like that. But, I feel like so many people, though, kind of feel like, well, he's a famous actor and nothing's going to happen to him, right? I mean, do you expect there really will be anything that happens to him, Erin?
I mean, he was charged. So there will be, unless he takes a sort of plea agreement, I don't foresee it getting dropped.
Wow.
For them to bring charges was such a monumental sort of thing to do, because they could have very easily said, we found no fault here, and it would have gone away. So they went that extra mile and that extra step to say, we are charging him with involuntary manslaughter.
I guess Martha Stewart went to prison, quote unquote. So, things could happen.
No, I mean, listen, there will be a trial unless he takes a plea agreement.
Wow.
And he could waive a jury trial. He could waive a speedy trial and make it take longer, and make it just a bench trial with only the judge. But I mean, this is going to be something that does not go away.
Yeah, I think he's going to take a plea deal, because I think one of his defenses is going to be that he's getting treated unfairly by the law because he's a celebrity, that there's an overcompensation.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's not a defense.
If he wasn't a celebrity, maybe he wouldn't have gotten charged, but now he's going to be like, well, you're trying to hold me up as an example. That's unfair. I bet he'll take a plea deal and maybe serve a couple months, 60 days, 90 days, something like that in jail, just enough to humiliate him, but not enough to fundamentally disrupt his lifestyle. I mean, this is a guy, honestly, who survived some pretty nasty scandals, and he's still, like it or not, he's a brilliant actor. He's always going to have the work that he wants to have. That's my prediction in this. I don't understand, actually, the people that think he shouldn't be charged, though. I mean, all of us ladies sitting here understand firearm safety. It doesn't matter if someone else certifies to you that the firearm is empty. You are responsible for not pointing it at somebody else's body, for not pulling the trigger. I mean, it didn't do itself. Not pulling the trigger while pointing it at someone else's body. He's obviously in criminal negligence here. He killed this person, and he shouldn't be held. He shouldn't just get off the hook. He should be held accountable.
No. And by the way, Liz, to piggyback on your point, there's no such defense, there is no mitigating circumstance, meaning the lessening the impact of your crime, to say you're a celebrity. That is by no means a defense. And I do agree with you that he will have to take a plea if he wants maybe to do house arrest or something like that, like home confinement. But he's going to, or community service, because he is facing 5 years right now. But if this prosecutor wants to make a name for herself, she might seek to hold his feet to the fire just to sort of advance her own aspirations or career, if she will. So I don't know. This could play out several ways, but I think people will be watching, and it's going to certainly be interesting.
What a time to be alive right now. There's so much. There's so much going on, not the least of which is Joe Biden. Okay, question for both of you. Do either of you believe that Joe Biden will run in 2024? Liz and then Erin.
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't think he's going to. But I don't think it's going to be some massive scandal that takes him down. I don't know if you guys saw this. You both probably did because you're both active on Twitter. But a couple of days ago, there was this clip from Rush Limbaugh about 2 months before he died, where he predicted how he said it would be the Obama apparatus would take Joe Biden down. And he said it would be through exposure of Hunter's corrupt business deals. And a lot of conservatives at the time were like, oh, this is what's happening now with the Biden classified document scandal. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if this is happening because it's not quite scandalous enough. It's horrible. It's criminal. It's dangerous. But it's not the exposure of Hunter's business apparatuses. So my prediction is that Biden will not run in 2024, but he will do so in a very almost gracious, graceful way. Say it's time to pass the torch. I'm going to hand it off to Gavin Newsom, for example. I don't think it's going to come with any scandal that could taint any other Democrat.
Interesting. What do you think, Erin?
I'm totally inclined to agree. I have very little to add because she said it so eloquently. I think a Michelle Obama and Newsom ticket and good old Joe will be up there hugging them both, reading the teleprompter, making gaffes, sniffing someone, tripping off the stage. What is it? End of quotes. Repeat the line. So,
exit off the stage. Yeah, no, I know. It's I don't think he's going to run. I mean, I don't see how anybody, apparently less than half of the people who voted for him in 2020 even want him to run again, according to a recent poll. And then, you look to kind of places out there like the Breakfast Club, for example, and Charlemagne the God, who was pretty hard the other day on old Joe and talked about how he saw him talking to a ghost. They had a whole back and forth there about Joe Biden and whether or not there should be some requirement to, get a cognitive test, some sort of a physical before you are actually able to become president. I mean, I think that's probably a great idea. Now, of course, one of the girls on there was like, well, they should have done that before Trump did.
Oh,
well, okay. I mean, he would have passed with flying colors, let's be honest. But I think that one has really flickered out. The only one I didn't see coming, Erin, you mentioned Michelle Obama and Gavin Newsom, which I totally agree. I think that's probably a hot ticket. Obama, Newsom, Obama, some variation of that. Eric Adams, there's a lot of speculation. The mayor of New York City, where things are just in shambles. And when you didn't think they could get any worse than Bill de Blasio, bring in Eric Adams and he'll show you real quick that things could get worse. He apparently, people are speculating he might run. I don't know. That one I can't see. I mean, we can't even keep it together in New York. I don't think that's possible.
But look at California and Democrat politics is the only profession where you continue to fail your way to the top. If you look at Joe Biden's 40-some year, air quotes, illustrious career, he has been wrong on every foreign policy decision. And these people yet continue to get more stature and more committee assignments and on and on and on and up the chain of commands. In any other profession or in the corporate world, you would have been fired and relegated to being unemployed. But no. When you're a Democrat in politics, you fail your way to the top. Adams isn't doing anything to advance New York. California is literally burning. Their infrastructure is failing. They have a huge deficit. I mean, these people are wholly unqualified, but it just doesn't seem to matter.
I mean, it's really kind of sad and scary, but I often wonder, where do Republicans stand at this point? Like, I don't know, Liz, I feel like things were not changed back to the original election rules in terms of, 2016. 2020 was a crazy year. People say all kinds of different things. I think I'd say half of America probably doesn't really believe that that was a fully fair election. I don't know. Can Republicans do it? I mean, what do you think? Whoever it might be.
Listen, I think that after the midterm election surprised me.
Yeah.
The midterm election surprised me because we went into the 2020 midterm elections and think about the environment in the country. There was a poll that was done either by CNN or CNBC. It was an exit poll on election day that said that the vast majority of people leaving the polling booth, 75%, were dissatisfied with Joe Biden. This comes on the heels of inflation skyrocketing, gas prices, food prices being unaffordable, critical race theory being infiltrated and embedded into our children's schools, queer theory targeting children, all of these different, both cultural and economic forces that people across the aisle didn't like. People did not like it, and they blamed Biden for it. Our country was conditioned for a change, for the sweeping red tsunami. And when that didn't happen, I sat back and I thought, okay, this is really odd. It's incongruent. It's hard to marry the idea that people were so unhappy with the state of the country with the fact that they voted for the same people who have put us into this position. So what happened? Yeah. And I think two things happened. First of all, there are issues of election integrity. There are issues, I call it electioneering, these rules and procedures at the state level that were changed oftentimes in a way that wasn't legal to change, like we saw in Wisconsin, that did impact the outcome of those elections, whether those are drop boxes, unattended, round the clock, the universal mail-in ballots, signature verification that's been, the quality of which has been degraded, all these different things absolutely do factor into Democrat victory. So does the ballot harvesting. I mean, they built this apparatus where they targeted demographics of people who they thought would vote Democrat. They went and they collected those votes. They took them to the drop boxes and the ballot boxes. That works. That does work. So that's part of it. The second part of it is not, and by the way, we can compete on that, and we should. We should simultaneously fight for election season to be reduced to election day, but also build up an apparatus to do ballot harvesting ourselves. But also, Laura, this is the harder part. The harder part is that when a population like our country has been conditioned into radical leftist ideology the way that we have through our education system, whether it's, kindergarten through 12th grade, the university system, pop culture, all of these different ways that our society and our culture has been corrupted, you can't change that or expect that to change overnight just because the price of gas is a little bit higher. People have been indoctrinated into thinking that we, Republicans, are evil, that you can't be a Republican unless you're racist and bigoted and homophobic and evil and hateful and maybe a domestic terrorist. That kind of brainwashing actually does work. And so it's incumbent on us to take back these institutions so we can turn this brainwashing around and retake people's minds in order to convince them of their votes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we got to play the same game. I think Republicans oftentimes, we are like, we're above all of this. We're not going to do any of that stuff. Forget it. If they are ballot harvesting and it's legal, you better believe we should be out there doing the same thing. We would be stupid not to do it. If we can't get, things changed back so that we have one day of voting and that everybody feels like the votes that they cast are secure, then we got to play the same game. Otherwise, it's pointless. I don't know what we're doing. I wonder too about all the people who were so upset with wherever it was they lived, New York, New Jersey, I mean, you name it, and they all moved to the red states. I think it made the red states redder. I think it made the blue states bluer. I don't know. I really wonder if Republicans, and look, it's up to, the folks at, the RNC, we got to get everybody on board for this, because that's the only way I think we're going to win in 2024. And obviously, I certainly hope that the nominee and the one who wins to become the 47th president of the United States is Donald Trump, because, man, we don't have any time to waste. We got to get going. We need somebody who's been there, who's done it. But, if we don't get this stuff straightened out, then it's going to be a tough road for anyone.
Right. I feel like he'll be so savage this time around. I'm praying that happens.
Well, we'll talk about that more maybe on the next episode of the review. Ladies, this has been lovely. I had like 50 other things I wanted to talk about, but I feel like we really got down and dirty on it all. And I'll tell you one thing, if masks come back, I dare them to try and get people to wear masks on planes again. I think there will be a lot of viral videos coming out of that situation, and I may or may not be involved in one of them.
Woohoo!
Yeah, yet to be seen. Liz Wheeler and Erin Elmore, thank you for being with us on today's episode of The Right View. To everybody at home, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time for more.